So here we're at the site of what we call Bear Creek 2. This one was established in 2017, so it just has a few years of data associated with it. And you can hear the amount of water that's rushing by. And so this drains a lot more acres than that first one. This one drains 150 plus acres. It's hard for us to know because the drainage records aren't very accurate once we get up into the really poorly drained landscape. So a lot of water is moving through it. The other thing is that the buffer, the distribution line is much shorter than the first site that we went to. So it's only 300 feet as opposed to about 1,000 feet. So the question is that I'll ask is that this site is taking a much smaller percentage, diverting a much smaller percentage of that water into that distribution line. But which site do you think removes over an annual basis more mass of nitrate nitrogen? The answer is this site does. And the reason why that is that because we are moving, even though it's a smaller percentage of the total, we are moving more water into that line for greater periods of time of the year. We still get about 100% removal once we get into those riparian soils. So this site is actually removes on an annual basis about 3 times the mass of nitrogen as that first site. So it's important for us to think about when we think about performance of these sites, not just in percent, what percent are we removing, but what we really want to optimize near these sites is for what's that total amount or mass of nitrogen that we're removing. And one of the things that you're going to notice as you look behind Billy and I is that the great difference in the perennial vegetation that's been established over the buffer. In the first site in Bear Creek 1, that riparian forest buffer was already established in 1995, and we came in 2010 and retrofitted that existing riparian forest buffer with a saturated buffer. In this case, this one was established again in 2017, and this was cropped right up to the edge. And so we had the opportunity to plant whatever met the objectives of the landowners and site-specific objectives for this site. So in this case, you're going to notice that it's all herbaceous vegetation. It was planted in a high-quality pollinator mix, working with our Monarch team, Iowa State or the Iowa Monarch Consortium. A really nice mixture of diverse grasses and forbs. And so as I look around, though we're early in the year and it's not really showy, I see the golden Alexander in bloom. I see the rigid goldenrod. I see the gray-headed coneflower that's coming in, Illinois bundleflower coming in, and a lot of other species. So this is a really diverse mixture.
I guess, Tom, I got to ask you, in your experience here with the native pollinator mix and the forest buffer, have you seen any difference in nitrate performance, nitrate removal performance? Because folks ask me all the time, what is the right vegetation to plant along our streams? That's
an excellent question. And the answer to what's the right, from a water quality perspective in a saturated buffer, the right vegetation to plant is whatever meets the landowner objectives. We see no difference in the nitrate removal capacity within these riparian soils, whether it's established to a riparian forest buffer or whether it's established to more herbaceous vegetation like pollinator habitat. The one thing we do see that is different is that if we go into an area that was cropped up to the edge like this and put that saturated buffer within here, the nitrate removal is lower in those earlier years when the field was in crops. Until that perennial vegetation gets that opportunity to get those roots down and provide that carbon for the bacteria, it's lower. But difference between vegetations, we're not seeing it.
Interesting. So it's more about age than
it's more about age than it is the composition of the vegetation, so long as it's perennial vegetation and providing that carbon for the bacteria.
That's a great point, and that folks ask me, you know, trees are grass, trees are grass, trees are grass. I guess we can kind of agree that any kind of perennial vegetation along our streams is far superior as far as water quality impact than, say, row cropping right up to the edge.
I'm a little biased towards making sure that's native as opposed to non-native perennial vegetation, but absolutely I'll agree with you.
Yes. Well, that's another great point. Again, people ask me all the time, what do I plant in stream side areas, trees or grass? And it kind of goes back to what are your objectives for the land? A great example here is that you all were talking about earlier, we're out here is, do you want, say, to promote turkey habitat? Turkeys need tall trees to roost. Say you want more of a quail habitat situation, you might want to go more heavy on the grass component. So Thoughts on that?
Yeah, we have actually done some research on that. Sarah Burgess did her master's thesis and published a paper on that where we looked at vegetation of different composition and ages and looked at breeding bird response. And what Sarah found was that we went from where it was cropped up to the edge or heavily pastured right up to the edge of the stream. There would be on an annual basis maybe about 12 breeding birds that were in there. By the time that buffer reached 10 to 12 years old, we were up almost to 50 bird species that were utilizing that area. And one thing she found is that the old mantra is that what you plant is what you get. She saw that if what your goals are to maybe some of our more species of greatest conservation need, our grassland birds, if that's what you want to promote, then you want to keep that woody riparian vegetation out and plant this in the herbaceous and grassland vegetation as wide as you can. If you like more of those edge species, like the catbirds, or the threshers, and maybe like some neotropical migrants coming through, then these woody species are going to provide that preferred habitat. Pheasants don't seem to care. They'll take either. And the one thing that has surprised us, you mentioned turkeys. We are well up into the headwaters of the Bear Creek watershed right now, and it really surprised us. We routinely see wild turkey up through. It's something we never thought we would see.
Excellent.